7 things you probably didn't know you need to know. I'm Jamie East, and this is the Smart 7.
Good morning, everybody. It's Monday the 7th of November and it's National Hugger Bear Day. And a big happy birthday to Lord, David Guetta, Tiny Temper and Rio Ferdinand. It's been, about 10 minutes since the last scandal, so you may be shocked to hear the government's been rocked by bullying allegations against Sir Gavin Williamson. The ex-Education Secretary is accused of sending threatening texts to former Chief Whip Wendy Morton because he wasn't invited to the Queen's funeral. Rishi Sunak was apparently aware of the claims before he offered Williamson a job, but didn't know the specifics and has since called the messages unacceptable. Speaking to the BBC, fellow Cabinet Officer Minister Oliver Dowdens also admitted they weren't appropriate, but was quick to defend his colleague.
Well, it was no secret that Gavin Williamson and others indeed didn't enjoy a good relationship with the Chief Whip at the time. It was not the case, though, that the Prime Minister saw the detail. It's
the second major controversy since the Prime Minister's cabinet appointments. He's already under fire for making Suella Braverman Home Secretary days after she was sacked for security breaches. Opposition parties now want Williamson gone, and someone who clearly wasn't surprised by the latest tech scandal was former Chancellor George Osborne.
People know that about Gavin, who, by the way, was a constant source of incredible gossip when he was David Cameron's PPS. It was always a highlight of the week when he told us what was going on in the Tory parliamentary party. Speaks more to the sort of problems the Truss government had got itself into, that the Chief Whip was the one who was being bullied rather than doing the bullying.
Nearly 200 nations are represented at the big COP27 climate summit, which got underway in Egypt on Sunday. Delegates have, for the first time at a COP meeting, agreed to discuss whether rich countries that are responsible for climate change should pay compensation to the poorer countries most vulnerable to its effects. The PM's travelled to Sharm el-Sheikh after U-turning on a decision not to go and is expected to tell countries not to backslide on their environmental commitments. Shadow Climate Change Secretary Ed Miliband argues the government ban on new onshore wind farms is driving up people's bills.
It is now cheaper to save the world than to destroy it. And what do I mean by that? I mean that renewable power are cheaper than fossil fuels. And this matters so much. So the government is saying no to the cheapest, cleanest form of power.
And as world leaders try to get a grip on global warming, United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres described the next few years as make or break.
COP27 must lay the foundations for much faster, bolder climate action now and in these crucial decades, when the global climate fight will be won or lost.
People in Kyiv are being warned to prepare for the worst this winter if Russia keeps striking the country's energy infrastructure. Mayor Vitaly Klitschko has urged residents to save electricity as much as possible. On Friday, 450,000 people in the capital were without power. The Evening Standard's defence editor Robert Fox told Times Radio Vladimir Putin's rethinking his military tactics as weather conditions worsen in Ukraine.
He's been compared to a poker player, to somebody who plays chess. One of my closest contacts and senior analysts on the scene says, actually, you're much better looking at the Oriental game called Go. It's a game of ruthless will, and where you can mess around with the tactics and win by any means that you want.
Meanwhile, Lib Dem leader Sir Ed Davies calling out Putin for waging an energy war against the whole of the Western world.
The UK will continue to aid their fight for their country, their democracy, and their freedom. Ukraine's fight is our fight.
You can now pay for a blue tick on Twitter, kind of. The subscription scheme for the so-called verification badge was announced soon after billionaire Elon Musk took over, but it's now reported it won't go live until after the American midterm elections. The firm began widespread staff cuts around the world on Friday, with suggestions as many as half of its more than 7,500 employees could be axed. Musk says the company is currently losing more than £3.5 million a day. And speaking to investors, he claimed tweets would be suppressed by an algorithm for those who don't pay the blue tick fee, which would solve hate speech, apparently.
The net effect will be, over time, that the verified users will pretty much always be at the top of comments and search, and you won't really see, you'll have to scroll far to see the unverified users, which will be the bots and trolls and whatnot.
Still to come on the Smart 7, catch up on a hectic weekend of Premier League action, and I'm a Celeb is back, right after this. Welcome back.
Unai Emery led Aston Villa to a 3-1 win against Man United in his first Premier League game in charge. After consecutive defeats, Liverpool bounced back by beating Tottenham 2-1 away, and Newcastle climbed to third with a 4-1 thrashing of struggling Southampton, while Crystal Palace scored in injury time to triumph 2-1 at West Ham. The London derby saw Chelsea lose 1-0 to Arsenal, which put Mikel Arteta's side back on top of the table. But relatively new Chelsea manager Graham Potter couldn't really complain about the result.
There's two teams on the pitch, and I think Arsenal defend well. They press well. They make it difficult for you to create chances. I think that's what the top teams do, and I think Arsenal at the moment are a top team. So, like I said, I don't like to say that, but that's probably the reality.
Love Actually star Bill Nighy says his latest movie role was impossible to turn down. He plays an elderly man who's told he has a terminal illness and decides he must start living life to the fullest. Sex Education's Amy Lou Wood also stars in Living, a remake of a 1952 Japanese film. Speaking to Sky News about manners and British stereotypes in movies, Nighy described the stiff upper lip as fascinating and said although it's a bit bonkers, people of his age have a kind of nostalgia for that formality.
It's fun, you know, to act in that sort of in that kind of recklessly restrained manner, and I'm interested in it as a thing, you know. I think it probably is regrettable, and psychiatrists would probably say it's a deeply unhealthy way of, you know, looking at life. But there's also something kind of heroic about it, and I think it's funny.
Last night was the moment we've all been waiting for. I'm a Celeb is finally back.
We've waited 2 years for this.
Here on I'm a Celebrity.
Get me out of here!
After the Matt Absolute Hancock announcement, the other celebs have got their work cut out to make sure they get enough airtime. Thankfully, though, the show didn't waste any time. Comedian Babatunde Elishe bottled walking the plank, leaving Lioness Jill and loose women Charlene to stick it to the patriarchy.
All you have to do, when you're ready, is let go of the rope.
Ready? 1, 2, 3! Yes! I'm so proud of you!
Well done!
This has been The Smart 7. Wherever you're listening, do us a favour and hit the follow button. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. Have a great day.
Written, produced and published by Daft Doris.